Today's session will be covering the client-side virtualization. Client-side virtualization is very common nowadays. This system is using an OS that manages a local server and executes a variety of local client devices. In this session, we're going to learn the purpose of client-side virtualization and the requirements and steps needed to set up client virtualization and the ways to avoid any common pitfalls. Our ultimate goal is to be able to define client-side virtualization and describe its purpose, list the requirements needed to set up and use client-side virtualization, describe how to use it, identify the common potential pitfalls, and including any security concerns. Virtualization is the technology that makes clouding computing possible nowadays. Without this, obviously, and the appropriate chips that we saw to be able to do that, and the motherboards to do it, obviously, we need to make sure our motherboards have the capability to provide this. Client side virtualization happens on the actual client machine. As for the client side desktop virtualization, it's done by creating multiple virtual machines on one physical machine using a hypervisor. We'll get into the details of everything and what these words are. Hopefully some of us read prior to coming into class. In order to set up virtualization on a computer, it must meet the the resource and emulator security and network requirements. We said the actual CPU's got to be able to handle it. The motherboard must be able to handle it, and obviously have the proper security. You have two types of actual hypervisors, a type 1 and type 2. We'll get into the actual thing, as we only remember that obviously the number one and the best one, as in any other security appliance, would be the physical one. Therefore, it would be the hardware type. That type of hypervisor does not have actual operating system versus that actual hypervisor 2, which is on top of the actual OS. And those both can actually create and manage virtual machines on a server or a local machine, depending on the software that you actually have. VMs, or virtual machines, must be secured using secure permissions, firewall, and malware protection, and isolated isolating settings. Obviously, there is issues, or when you actually want to actually use it, for instance, in a sandbox environment, to be able to test any patches, and or maybe if a application is going to get tested in a testing environment without actually affecting the actual operations. Anyone tell me, how would you explain virtualization to a client from what we've read so far?
Diego, we missed our ice cream truck.
We did? Where'd he go?
Yeah, man. I guess he
I
went on
didn't
the
hear him. Did you guys hear him?
he went on the other
He's a
street.
ripoff. He's a ripoff, man. All right. Let's go then. I'll see you guys here. So anybody can explain to me what virtualization is and how they would probably identify or state it to maybe a client. Okay. What if I told you that you were in a virtual reality? Could you actually explain that one to me?
With virtualization, it's like setting up a network through software instead of hardware, right?
That is correct. You could actually set up a network appliance, a virtual appliance that's a router, a virtual appliance that's a switch, a virtual appliance that's a print server, a virtual appliance that's a firewall. I could keep on going. Whatever you can have in the real world, you can have, as our friend just alluded to, in the virtual world. within one appliance, you can make a plethora now. So now that you have this humongous server that you paid about $30,000 or maybe a little bit more, depending how much you wanted to pay for it, you can actually create a plethora of computers and or devices. Hence, your friend there in the cloud, Amazon, and I believe Microsoft jumped onto that too, right? Microsoft has Zoom. I can't remember these names. But there is obviously several other vendors out there that give you the opportunity in the actual cloud, in the public cloud, to be able to create these things. You could actually create it in-house too. So it's not that it's only available on the internet. You can actually internally in your intranet create these environments. Any questions or doubts? Oh, I'm here looking for the buttons in the other screen. That's too cute. There we go. So what we need to understand is that we must be adaptable because of the fact that there is two different versions, and depending on what we are able to purchase, because as we can see, the actual hardware-based ones versus the actual OS-based ones, those can cost much more because of the fact that actual hardware-based ones are much more secure. There is no operating system to hack. He himself has the GUI application or the hypervisor that gives you the capability to be able to create any virtual appliance that you want from that screen. Where as for the other one, which is the actual one that runs on top of the actual operating system, that one then you first boot up on the operating system, you open the actual hypervisor application, and you can now proceed to actually configure any virtual appliance that you want. Any questions on the actual different systems and how they are? Questions? Doubts? All right. Kareem, help me out here, please.
Virtualization purpose. While a workstation can run multiple operating systems, they cannot run them at the same time. With virtualization, the same workstation can run many different operating systems simultaneously on different virtual machines, VM. This saves hardware costs when needing to have access to different operating systems for many reasons, including testing software on different platforms, working in a support environment, developing new code.
Thank you. So within this within this virtual environment, you can create, as we said, any appliance that you want to be able to facilitate the process, including servers, security, file sharing, printer management, whatever you want to do, you can be able to do that, including even creating a sandbox environment that would obviously be able to facilitate the ease of testing something in a virtual world to ensure that it doesn't crash in the real world.
Question, is there like
Question.
a maximum that the operating system can handle, or is it just depending on how much RAM you got?
So depending on the processing power that you have and the actual memory, as you just stated, because of the fact that each given operating system is going to require so much memory and so much processing power, and hopefully you have enough disk space too, right?
Right. So sky's the limit as long as you got the infrastructure for it.
Technically, yeah,
Okay.
technically. As for the ones in our houses, you'll notice that most likely after the third one is gonna, mine can take, I think, up to 12 only, because it has 12 processors. So Every processor I can dedicate, well, sorry, 11, right? Because I lose one for the OS and then the rest are for the virtual environment. Remember that the actual host needs processing power himself, right?
Yeah, that's your code.
Now that, yeah, that would be that would be a hypervisor 2 because I'm running it on top of Windows.
All right. So that's what about with hyperthreading? So
Hyperthreading, we will be able to mimic multiple processors. Hence, then if it does hyperthreading, I would technically be able to do
22, you could double it.
24, right? So then I missed one, so that's 23.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Good question. Everybody understand what he means by hyperthreading and the word he's using? Okay. Let's continue on then to the next slide. Did I just close that? You would do something like that to me. No, I didn't. Good. Next one, please. Chris.
The hypervisor. The key enabler for virtualization is a piece of software called the hypervisor, also known as Virtual Machine Manager, VMM. The hypervisor software allows multiple operating systems to share the same host. It also manages the physical resources available to the VMs. There are two types of hypervisors, type 1 and type 2.
Thank you. As we mentioned, obviously the type 1 is the actual hardware one, while the other one is the software-based one. Depending on, again, on what type of money you can get approved, the type 1 is much better than the type 2, specifically and when it concerns of security. It is also mentioned as bare metal. I like to call it bare bone, but the real name is bare metal. It's or native. This is the one that obviously it itself is the OS per se. The physical machine, the hypervisor, it's all it boots up into. After that, that GUI little representation that you have there gives you the capabilities as any other hypervisor to be able to create any machine you want. We need to be able to understand that this is not just computers. You can create any machine you want, any virtual appliance. Obviously, not a car, people, come on. The stadium computers talk here and routers, switches, and things that are for the purpose of that. Okay, sorry. I figured out why the ice cream truck was not ringing. He was actually just vibrating over there next to my son. Thank you. Back to our previous program, now that we know why we missed our ice cream. Overall, the purpose is to be able to share and manage hardware resources between different OSs with ease. With the type 1, it's much faster and much secure than the type 2 compared to the obviously on the actual type 2, you'd lose processing power to the actual OS, and or you also are susceptible to the actual OS. So to make sure that your actual OS on the host himself is up to date. And on top of that, now you got to worry about the actual virtual host. In the actual type 1, you only worry about the flaws that every virtual machine that you have out there, because of the fact that the Citrix or Zen and Microsoft's Hyper-V servers are pretty much locked down. Me personally, as I always say, Microsoft was a PC. Therefore, if you sell chicken, don't give me steak. I wouldn't buy a Microsoft hypervisor, even if they paid me. I would first go into a Citrix, Zen, or something that's Linux-based before I even trust Microsoft as a server. Once again, there is the capabilities, then they actually exist. As for the actual OS, anything that you can install on top of Apple or any Linux OS, for PCs or Windows. There is VMware, Oracle, VirtualBox, and some other ones that are available there to be able to obviously create these virtual appliances with the hypervisor. Any questions on the one or two? So here we are with the actual, you could say, visual representation. You actually have here on the left the type 1, then on the right type 2. You'll see then the actual hardware, in other words, my motherboard and all that stuff. And then on this one right away is the hypervisor, the terminal that I'm going onto. Versus on the right, you see that the OS has come up. Now the hypervisor is at this layer. That's the main difference. As for how they work, you'll notice it's the exact same thing right after that. The only variance is one is directly, as soon as you boot up, going into the actual hypervisor versus the other one comes up on the OS. And then now you got to open up a secondary application to be able to then configure these things. Most of these GUI graphical user interfaces are pretty much similar to each other. So with ease, if you know how to create an appliance in one, you should hopefully be able to read and get your way around the other ones. Any questions or doubts? Just like in any other actual computer, you have the actual, here's your hypervisor. So you're going to go ahead and on this computer, you're going to install his OS. So I can install a Linux OS here. I can install Windows OS over here, install whatever applications I need here, and install whatever applications over there. Why would I do this? Maybe I need Windows XP, and those two applications only run on XP, and then these run on Windows 7, but the actual company has moved to Windows 10, as an example. It gives you the ease to do whatever you want, including, as we studied before, you can create virtual switches, routers, servers.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Out of type 1 and type 2, which one is more common?
Type 1 hypervisor would be enterprises. Type 2 hypervisors most likely running in the majority of mom and pops, and then depending on the mid ones, if they can actually cough up the money for a type 1, they'll go for that. If not, most likely they would go for a type 2. You do understand that a type 2 hypervisor could be maybe a server that's out there where I install Microsoft Windows Server, and now I installed a hypervisor application on it, and now I allow them to go ahead and create whatever they want on them. But once again, it's all up to how much money can you cough up. Usually the type 1s are so expensive that enterprises and or Fortune 500 companies are the ones that can afford them.
Another quick question is, can it simulate a non-x86 processor?
It can simulate 86 and 64-bit processing. It can create any appliance that's in the real world. That's a computer appliance. I'll show you. I believe we're going to have a lab in reference to that. Let me see. Did you? I opened it. Can we see my desktop, or you still see the presentation?
Still the presentation.
There we are. I got rid of all the other ones. I got tired of messing around with that black arch. Oh my God, that was difficult to hack. I didn't get too far with that, bro. I said, I gave up. I really did. It's a good operating system. As for, here's your Windows operating system, and this here is what they call the hypervisor. This GUI thing that you see in front of you is the hypervisor. Basically, it lets you see all the virtual machines that you have here. With ease, I can actually clone this computer and create another one. So that if anything happens to that machine, at least I have a copy of it. I can even bring the UUIDs with it, everything, so it could be exactly the same. So if this guy crashes, I can bring up another virtual guy right back up, exactly the one that was there. So how do I do this? When I go and create one, when I hit add, no, new, where's new? Here, new, thank you. So here goes Pepe 2. As soon as I come in here, he's going to ask me, the hypervisor wants to understand, what do you want to do? Why is he asking me? So he can understand what type of virtual appliance is he going to create for you, so that you can be able to install an OS on top of this virtual appliance. Without this actual step, obviously, as you stated, it will make it very difficult to a 64-bit computer to mimic an 86 without these options. To the point that I could actually identify exactly what type of OS I want. Now, remember, this is to identify what I'm going to do. So what it will do is create Windows 3.1. I love it. This is my favorite Windows. I can actually come in here and create this. So when I hit next, it should already know exactly what I need. Now it's going to tell me, like in the back of the box, exactly what is it that you need bare minimum. God only knows. I only wish you only need 32 megabytes of RAM nowadays. Those are the good old days. Anybody know how much 32 megabytes is? Nobody? Nobody's giggling about this, really. You do realize that I have 16 gigs and Windows 3.1 is only asking for 32. Oops, I gave it too little. As for, we need to also obviously be careful, because some of these things are not, or the operating system is not able to handle any more than that. Next step that it actually asked me here to be able to identify what type of disk do I want. Do I add it from one that I already have? Do I not add anything? Or attach one that's already there? I want to create a brand new one. In here now, it's going to ask me, okay, what type of one do you like? I myself always, I don't know, I'm just that type of person. I love the guy in the middle. The image is an image, therefore it cannot be used by anybody else. It is an image of the actual disk. If I create a virtual disk, it is a resource that I can actually pull. Therefore, I can actually attach other computers to this virtual hard drive if I create it this way. When if I create it this way, from my understanding, unless if something's changed, that is an image. Therefore, it's only useful for that given computer. Question so far. Now I go back over here. Next part is depending on what you're using this for. If this is for a testing environment, you are strongly recommended to do a dynamic disk. If it is for production, it is strongly recommended for you to use a fixed disk. The reason why they allow you to do the actual one or the other is because in a testing environment, I don't want to just eat up disk space. I don't want to wind up giving 32 gigs to every single computer in here if I'm only going to be using this for testing purposes. So if I have every single computer in here, maybe as a backup, and each one has 32 gigs and I do it fixed, I'll run out of space real quick. Versus if I create it dynamically, it'll only eat up as much space as it requires. And at the moment that it needs more space, it automatically expands itself, and the threshold would be up to 32 gigs. The moment that I pick fixed disk, automatically in my host, the actual computer that's doing this, not the computer that I'm using, but the actual computer that's hosting this, loses that space. Unusable except for that virtual disk or image to use. Here, as we see, it's only allowing me to use a gig. Once again, I chose a Windows 3.11. It knows that I shouldn't be using that much. Now, you'll notice that if I try to actually start this computer, it's just like if I turn on a computer that I just put together. And if I just put a computer just together, what do you think is going to happen? If I turn on a computer that I just put together? Anybody got a wild guess what might happen? Nothing bad's going to happen. It's just going to ask me something. What do you think it's going to ask me?
You gotta create your user account, right?
Ooh, close. It's asking me to format the disk. It's a brand new computer that I just put
okay.
together. And since I don't have Windows 11, I'm not going to be able to obviously do that. But in our lab, we're going to learn to actually create, and we have an OVA, which is a Oracle virtual appliance that you're able to import and to use, which is this Kali one that you have here. And we're giving you an ISO to mimic the installation of Windows. Questions, doubts? No other questions on that? Everybody okay so far? All right. Next one. You can help me out, please. Marcus.
Client-side virtualization requirements. Running multiple OSs on one physical workstation will require more resources than running a single OS. For performance reasons, the workstation used for virtualization should be well equipped, specifically in type 2, which divide resources between the host OS and each VM OS. The primary resources are CPU, RAM, and hard drive space, and network performance.
Thank you. As we see, network performance is specifically on your given network card of this host will be obviously another throttle point. You're only as good as your weakest link in that point. If you don't have sufficient cards in the back of this given device, or if you don't have a 10G card, network card towards the switch, it will slow down every time everyone starts using this. If it is for actual online production, you're going to require obviously also several cards in the back of this device, which is the host. Any questions? Everyone understand so far? No doubts? Problems? All right, as for your CPU, a multi-core processor itself, as we mentioned, is recommended since the actual hypervisor itself can treat each individual core as a processor, as like it was a processor for that virtual actual machine. It can even create multiple virtual processors out of one single core. Some hypervisors require the CPU to specifically be designed to support virtualization, be the Intel VT or the AMD V. At the same time, a lot of these things, you need to ensure that inside the BIOS or the UEFI, that it is enabled before you actually install. You'll see that a lot of individuals, if you see that after you try to install this Oracle VirtualBox, it's going to start freezing on you. Hence, go check maybe if it is obviously a new computer, check your actual BIOS settings because the majority of these things have it by default turned off. Memory is a humongous concern. As we know, all operating systems by default tell you the minimum amount of RAM that they need. Therefore, depending on every given operating system that you have, including the host himself, if it is a type 2, you need to calculate the amount that this OS is going to take up and how much the actual virtual OS is going to take up. Can you tell me when, if I go and install 8 gigs of memory, all of a sudden I can't use it in this virtual machine? What could be the actual problem? It is a type 2 hypervisor. I've just successfully installed, I'll even tell you, I installed 16 gigs and it doesn't seem to be able to use that. What could be the problem?
Double check your cards and make sure they're seated correctly. Your
The
memory?
BIOS on the boot sees it beautifully, which really annoyed me because it asked me to save the changes. So it saw all 16 gigs. But when I come up and I boot into my hypervisor and obviously operating system, for some weird reason, it only sees 4 gigs. I'll give you that much of a clue. Did we do that chapter? Let me go
Oh.
back in time.
The OS is a 32-bit system.
Thank you. I guess we did do that chapter. There, you are correct. A 32-bit processor and motherboard is unable to use anything beyond that.
Yeah.
Because if we put 2 to the 32, if we put in a calculator 2 to the 32, it will come up with the number 4096 or 4 million something, which is 44 gigabytes. So if you have doubts where that number comes from, that's where it comes from. A 32-bit processor can handle that. So if we do the exact same thing for a 64-bit processor, you can see that's a lot right there. I forgot how much was the total. Anybody remember what's the total for 64-bit? It's ridiculous. I know that much. I guess I can get my calculator.
Got 1,000 gigs of RAM. Roughly about 1,000, I think.
Yeah, one is 18. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 sets of threes. That's 18 zeros behind. 18 with 18 zeros. God only knows how much that is, but that's a lot. I'm pretty sure it says an exact number in the book, but the key one that they always are going to test you on is that 4 gigs of RAM. Whenever you see that issue on a question where they're saying that you've installed something and they specifically say that the BIOS has no concerns about it, check the OS. What type of processor and or OS do you have installed? All right. Any questions or doubts on this slide? I could use or read exactly every word. The key thing obviously here is to understand what the actual guest OS and what the host OS are going to be eating up so that you could be able to calculate and build the correct server or PC. This is minimum requirements. Remember, if you're looking at minimum requirements, you want to make sure that you are beyond that. But if you get bare minimum, as soon as everybody starts using these resources, you're going to have issues. Right. Here we see an example where you can enable inside the actual BIOS. So we hit delete F12, whatever it is that the actual manufacturer tells us to hit when we're coming up, and get into the actual advanced settings of security usually, and you'll find that it has virtualization usually disabled. You can actually come in here and hit the plus sign to be able to change the actual value. Then you hit F10 and hit F10 one more time to save and exit, or Y, depending on the actual file. Questions or concerns? All right. As for the requirements of the actual network, we need to understand since your physical NIC card is the one that's in the real world, every single virtual computer in there is using you as technically as a router, a bridge, a switch. It all depends on how you create that virtual environment. So you need to be able to identify, do you want it to actually exist in the real world? Do you want to be natting the actual traffic? whatever it is that you choose, depending on if and when you need it or where you need it, you choose and you can actually create it. So if we remember what a bridge is, anyone know what a bridge is?
You're connecting two dissimilar networks, right?
In this case, a virtual network with a real network. And you're going to be in the exact same subnet, right? And then you have NATing. If I'm NATing as a router, would I be in the exact same subnet? The real world and the virtual world, would it be in the same subnet? I'm routing through a router, one side to the other, and it's NATing. Everyone remember what NAT means? Network address translation, which is what the router does. He basically
Oh, you
says
would be
that
in
he's
different
you.
networks, right?
Correct. Thank you. Since the actual internal network, then your computer becomes a DHCP server. Majority of times, if I recall, is 192.168.1. I'm not aware of you being able to choose. I don't remember the hypervisor allowing you to choose those settings as in, what range you want. I can't remember if you can or not. Obviously, that is all dependent because maybe if you create a virtual appliance that's going to give DHCP instead of allowing the actual host doing it, then obviously in that case, that virtual appliance would be in control of that virtual network inside. Well, that almost gave me a headache, virtually. No? All right. Any other questions or concerns? So, as I mentioned before, every hypervisor can even create virtual switches. So you can actually create a virtual appliance that's a switch. And then everyone gets connected to this virtual switch. It will be there as we see that we can select a bridge mode, that we can select NAT. We can even select, as long as the virtual switch is created, we can create this virtual switch and it'll be in that hypervisor as an option to connect to this virtual switch. Now, every single virtual machine inside this hypervisor is going to be virtually connected to the virtual network via the virtual switch. Then you have, this is a representation of the actual physical server and his physical NIC card, which then physically in the real world is connected to the physical switch. For computers at that point are talking to this one physical switch, the server and the 3 virtual machines. Questions? Since you are in a virtual environment with this hypervisor, the hypervisor, has full control and choice if this is even possible. You can create a virtual switch inside this network, create a whole entire network in there, and just disconnect this card to ensure that that virtual network does not escape. And that's how they create a sandbox. The moment that you disconnect the actual physical NIC from the virtual environment, now this environment is self-contained in the sandbox. And you can test whatever you want. You can test worms, malware, new software, patches, whatever it is. As long as this now is turned off, you have successfully created an air gap between the actual physical world and the virtual world.
So when you got video game developers saying that they're going in the sandbox and tweak it for the game to do,
That's what they're doing. Is they're going into that environment that's not real, test
Right.
the code and play with the code, let the code crash and fix it, And then when they see that it's working good in the sandbox, then they go and grab that code and they put it into the real world. Most
Got it.
likely before they put it into production, now that it's in the real world, is the actual what they consider beta tests and or alpha tests at that point to ensure that it's working before they put it into production.
Gotcha.
This is big money saver for what it is corporate world or anyone that's out there because of the fact that now I don't have to go and buy another server that cost me almost $20,000 just to be able to allow this coder to be able to code. Because the coders, a lot of times when they're making these applications, they're made for certain processors and certain equipment. Therefore, they need to have that exact type of processor and equipment in them and mimic the actual server, hence saving them thousands of dollars. Next one here, please. Faison.
Requirements, security. All security concerns that affect individual computers also apply to VMs. VMs are vulnerable to hackers and malware just like the host machines. If the VMs has access to the internet, it must be protected, isolated, and have permissions secured for files and VM holds. You must ensure the guest OS and antivirus programs are kept up to date.
Thank you. As we see, there is a very, very big concern, specifically earlier, as we saw, Diego tried to create a Windows 3.1 machine. God only knows, thank God he didn't have a CD, because that has a humongous loophole, and obviously people can get in. Not only does the guest, but the actually host are major concerns, and specifically in all these type 2 hypervisors. A lot of these guest OSs and the actual host OSs have a lot of security loopholes. So therefore, it is strongly recommended that we always keep these things up to date with anti-malware. Make sure, hopefully, if possible, to install some type of other appliance in the network or host-based, right? Either a HIPS or a NIPS, to try to make sure that this given device is not, which is the host, is not fully compromised. We understand also that the actual guest OSs also we need to be able to maintain. It becomes tedious, obviously, when it comes to all these different virtual machines to ensure that they're up and running. Therefore, if they're all part of the domain and they actually have the actual Tivoli endpoint installed or any other endpoint installed to be able to distribute these things, that would obviously facilitate and automate the processes of patching and or updating the malware software. Questions or doubts? Next one here, please, Kimberly.
Excuse me, an emulator runs one type of program on a platform that is different. For example, emulators can be used if you want to run an Android-based game on a Windows PC. This method is slow and causes resources to bog down, so running a VM with that specific OS works better. Although emulators and hypervisors have been used interchangeably, they do different things. The hypervisor emulates hardware and presents the virtual hardware to each VM. The hypervisor also supports
Oops,
oh.
that was my fault. I was trying to maximize on my window. Sorry about that.
The
We're back, I think.
hypervisor also supports multiple OSs, while an emulator appears to work as one specific OS. The only requirement of the emulator is that it is compatible with the host OS.
Thank you. So the emulator itself, as we can understand, maybe some of you actually have installed this or maybe even seen it. It's the ones that you could actually install, for instance, and emulate Nintendo 64. It's on top of your actual computer and it eats up all the resources of your computer. As for a virtual machine, as we saw, it has a hypervisor. I give you the resource. I choose how much you can actually do. I can actually maybe create and install on top of that machine a Nintendo 64. And as I said, that's going to run much smoother than actually letting it eat up and bog down my computer. With an emulator, it is software on top of your OS. So just like any other software, if it needs the resources of the host OS, it will eat up all the resources. Any questions or doubts? Your VDI, your virtual desktop infrastructure, this refers to the process of running a user desktop inside a virtual machine. A lot of the people that have been in companies, maybe they have seen this where they go and they're instead of actually using their computer, they double click on this thing that almost looks like basically like remote desktop, and they go into this actual machine. When they log on, they have all applications that they need on that virtual desktop. This has been used a lot nowadays within the Fortune 500. It facilitates the process and ease that if my computer breaks down, my physical computer breaks down, now all they need to do is allow me to log on to any other computer that has the actual virtual desktop application there that I could just double click and I'm back up and running. This is all housed within the actual server itself, and it obviously provides the environment as a traditional PC. You get to choose everything that is seen, just like in any domain server, you can actually specify what they can and cannot do inside this virtual environment. It's similar to a roaming desktop, but it's not the same. Just for those that maybe know what a roaming desktop is very similar to a roaming desktop, but in this case, it is not. Because the roaming desktop actually downloads your desktop information to the computer itself when you every time you log on. Here, it stays in that server and provides that GUI representation as if you were sitting in that computer. Questions, doubts? General steps to follow when using your actual client-side virtualization. We need to be able to determine the actual client's need. How many do they need? How many appliances are we going to create? How much money, obviously, do they have would be one of the key things. Because obviously they can ask for the Mercedes Benz, but the poor child only has enough maybe for a putt-putt. Therefore, we need to be able to identify with ease exactly what is that they're capable of getting and setting them straight. At the same time, we need to be able to evaluate and ensure that we are able to identify. You want the Mercedes? This is all the parts you need. This is everything you need to be able to purchase it. Now, do you want to maybe go for a Hypervisor 2 and maybe you don't need all those, leather interior and God only knows how many appliances you just chose, and we can maybe only create 3 or 4 of them. Now we can set you up for now like this and give them obviously different choices. Either which way, we need to identify what type of also security requirements may need to be used and install the hypervisor on the guest OS whenever they choose. Obviously, hypervisor is in a type 1 or a type 2. At the same time, at the point of planning, we need to identify exactly which type of hypervisor are we going to be using and purchasing to be able to do the job. Any questions or doubts? Are they being too loud back there, taking that apart, guys? Shh. Sorry about that. Thanks, guys.
What?
Anybody gonna wake up? It's lunchtime. Jesus, bro, this ice cream truck, bro. I think they fired my ice cream truck, man.
The way that
think they
background
did.
looks, Diego, it looks like they're working on your head.
It might be, yeah, right. Maybe I think there's a screw loose right about there. All right, guys. I'll see you guys in. You guys can see my screen again, hopefully.
Yes, sir.
All right. Right before we went on a break, we covered the steps to follow when obviously using a client-side virtualization and any questions or doubts on these 5. We always give them what they want, and then obviously we adjust to that what they really need. They ask for what they want, we give them the price of what they want, and then obviously what they really need, we can obviously propose if they don't have that type of money on what they want. Any questions or doubts? All right. As we see here, installing a hypervisor is as simple as installing any given software itself. I, my friend, I'm just like Marvin, more of a virtual kind of guy. I don't like static images. Let me see if this comes out. As we had earlier, Pepe here, we can actually create a brand new computer. As soon as you open up the actual Hyper machine, sorry, I just hit to start that, didn't I? That was real cute. Come in here, create a brand new one. We'll go ahead and call him Peps3 most likely. And here, for the purpose of our lab, it's 32-bit or 64-bit. Do you remember actually which was, Marvin? I think it was 32-bit, right? The ISO.
Yeah, Windows 7 32-bit. Yes, sir.
So, as we did earlier today, we were able to specify what type of OS we want, and on top of that, what version exactly we want. Once again, he will then attempt to create a virtual machine with the minimum requirements. As you notice now, it's not giving me 32 megabytes. It's saying that I need at least 1 gig of RAM to be able to obviously run this. I can give him more if I like, but obviously no less, because if you do that, it's not going to run. Hit next. Once again, as we said, we can create or we can use an existing hard drive. So I'm going to go use Pepe 2's little hard drive, which was the one for that Windows 3 one that I had there. Now I'm here and ready to go. From what we experienced earlier, does everyone remember what's going to happen now if I try to turn this on? Will it work? No, right? All right. So let's go then into, they change these buttons. Here goes settings. God only knows they can't leave these things alone. It does look cuter though. Doesn't this look cuter, Marvin? The little menu on the top compared to last cohort just 2 months ago.
Yeah.
They changed the little buttons.
Yeah, it looks, yeah, it's different.
I like it. I like the little sheep. That's the first thing I like.
Clone.
All right. Now that I hit the actual settings in this GUI here, now is this exactly here on the left side is as if I was touching my BIOS. I'm touching things in the actual motherboard and configuring the motherboard before it comes up. Obviously, it looks nothing like a BIOS, but it allows me to do everything like a BIOS. Here, I can actually specify again, if it has a network, if I want to boot on a network, move my optical drive, move it down, just like you do in a BIOS itself. You can change the processors, how many processors you want to be able to utilize and or give to this computer. And the same thing with any other settings when it comes to the actual thing. USB, share folders. As for your actual storage, which is the reason I wanted to come in here, is it as soon as I click on storage, now in the middle is where it allows me to go and select which of these devices do I want. if we can look at these icons, hopefully we can be able to figure out that one of them looks like a hard drive and the other one looks like a CD. Since I do have a virtual CD, I want to go into here. Now, equivalent to pressing the little button on your CD drive, now I just selected him, right? But I want to press the button. Over here on the right is the actual little CD drive so that I can able to select which CD I want to use. An ISO file is a file that is mimicking exactly a file that is on an actual CD. Therefore, when I select, sorry, that was the one for hacking. Sorry about that. Let's go to the one that we really need, which is for Windows. Now it's inside my drive. You see, now it no longer doesn't say blank. It says A+. I can say OK, or if I feel like changing any other settings, audio, here goes my actual network card. As I mentioned before, if I have several adapters, I'll be able to select whichever adapter I want off the actual given host. Here, I can actually put myself in Sandbox. As simple as that, now I have successfully just turned on Sandbox. Why? Because I turned off the network card from the actual real world. As soon as I turn it back on, it asks me, would you like to select NAT, bridge, internal network, host adapter, generic drivers, and you could actually, if you had it already, it'll allow you to select a actual virtual switch. Questions or doubts so far? All right, so now I'm set up my actual hardware. I put my CD in place. I click OK. Let's turn this guy on. He's coming. There he is. Coming up slowly. Now here is my Windows CD. It's asking me which language I want, what type of time and currency, and the keyboard. I hit next. In here, you could actually repair with this CD. I can go into and repair what they call the Windows repair or recovery. If I come in here, it will attempt to repair any Windows 7 that I have installed there as a booting operating system. But since I don't have one, then obviously that would not work. Click install. As for installation, you have upgrade and you have the ability of custom or advanced. Upgrade here means exactly that. You will upgrade from a different version of Windows to this Windows. A custom install allows you now to custom full install or choose exactly if you want to load drivers or any other things that you want. Even choose exactly which drive if you have several drive to be able to install it on. I go ahead and select and leave it selected there and click next. We're looking at, oh, that's too cute. The original disk is too small. That's what I give. All right. That was a Windows 3.11 computer. Only had 1 gig. And my hard drive is too small. Let's go back in here. Hopefully this guy works. All I did again, you saw how quickly I was able to switch it out by being able to. Did I just boot up with that? I think I did. Hopefully not. I did. I just booted up with Peps. I'm gonna shoot myself sometime today for being lazy. This is what you call too lazy. You remove. All right. Go into settings. Go ahead and put my CD back on. And try one more time.
How much RAM do you have on your notebook, Diego? Is it 32? Do you have 32?
I can't remember. Is
I
it
think I saw
32?
32.
On my computer itself?
Yeah.
That was how
computer, I'm
much
sorry.
RAM, I mean, drive it was asking for, I think, what you're talking about. What it just asked was hard drive. Now, what I do have, I'll tell you now, computer info, is it? It might be too probably this is good. I hate this new keyboard. It's like this small. I don't know who created this keyboard. It doesn't even have a numpad.
Yeah, I gotta have another pad.
No, I got 16.
16. Okay.
16 gigs of RAM, and I think it has also on the GPU.
Okay.
That might be where you saw 32 because the actual GPU has onboard, but the computer only has 16.
I really appreciate how this gives the genuine feeling of setting up a new computer, like it's brand new out
Yeah.
of the box that you'll have to do.
Right, brand new out of the box. Like if you actually turned on a physical computer, it's amazing what they were able to do with these things. I wish I
Yeah.
knew how in the world they do it. Very powerful software, as we can see here. I can have this guy turned on. I can turn on this guy over here. As for Kali, when you guys get Kali, it has the most difficult password to remember, and I do apologize for that. So just be prepared to write it down. As you can see here in white, it says Kali. Therefore, since it says that, I put Kali. And then it says here on the actual white sign, it says Kali. So therefore, I should put Kali. I know, very difficult. I do apologize. As for after you're logged in here, you'll be able to go into the terminal and be able to use it with ease. The main purpose of this is to be able to get in here and use the actual commands, either you're doing ls or if you're doing if config, whatever command. Well, obviously I forgot this one doesn't have it. I think it looks like if it's a wireless. Oh yeah, that's right. This one has the cards turned off, is it? We'll soon find out. Either which way, it does also have a plethora of other tools to play with. You can play with that at your own time and discretion. But as for the actual class, your need is to be able to come into this terminal screen when we get to those chapters and be able to use the terminal screen to be able to obviously practice the commands that you need to learn. As for the test, you are not required to know how to install Linux. Linux is not an easy thing to do. It's pretty difficult if you have no idea or ever even dealt with Unix to just get Grub up and running. Therefore, the only expectation is to be able to use the actual shell screen to be able to run the commands that you would be running as a technician. So let's go see back here. How's he doing? Still booting up. And Pepe's up and running. So as we can see with ease, I have 3 computers up and running, doing 3 different things, plus my computer in the background, which is the 4th. And obviously, I always keep it very hard to break into these things. No password. Here, please ensure that since the CD is, you're not going to have a key, just uncheck automatically when I'm online and hit next. Just use recommended settings and then obviously change to your local UTC. In my case is Eastern, yours is most likely Central. Here is one of the key things to learn about this, depending what you choose, and if you choose wisely, it will set it up the way you want. Please choose work network to try to facilitate the actual all features that you would have in a given work environment. Questions or doubts? Eventually, it will say this: you are maybe a victim of software counterfeiting. Please just disregard, since you're not really going to be using this for anything except for playing and breaking it instead of breaking your own computer. There's no reason for you to have a real Windows with a real license. It is real Windows and Enterprise, but it's not going to be used for your house. Questions or doubts? Okay. Power off. Whenever you close here or you hit this one power off, it means exactly it. Power off is good as sufficient as actually pulling it right off the wall. But if I click this button, I said send the actual signal, it's equivalent to actually going and obviously trying to shut it down the right way. Questions or doubts? All right. So I believe we reviewed all these little plethora of slides. We can continue. As for your pitfalls of virtualization, is setting up the actual environment is no different than actual any Windows install or any installation of an OS. You'll have the exact same issues if you don't have some sufficient memory, hard drive space, or processing power. Another issue you may run into itself is the actual machine is it able and capable of being able to do virtualization itself. And lastly, any security concerns and or permissions that may have to be coming into play, be within the actual guest OS or the actual host OS, maybe the host OS or maybe the actual host network may be impeding this and stopping that type of traffic from going across. Questions or doubts? As always, now that we have a virtual machine, just like any regular machine, we need to make sure that it's up to date and that all security patches for that given OS are actually in that computer. Do not assume that just because your host is up to date and your host is not at risk, if that virtual machine is on the network and can get out of that sandbox, it is a threat. It is possible for a virtual machine to actually jump out of the virtual world and come into the real world and take over the actual the hypervisor or your OS. All right. As for this activity, I believe we just went over this and we can technically create this on our own. Do we have the ID and password for them to be able to get to that? Or can we just share it to them? Oh, no, that's right. We can't. They have to go in.
Yeah, I don't think we tried to put it.
Unfortunately, Google is so smart. The Google Drive is able to identify that I have placed an ISO on Google Drive. The file is so large that I cannot email it. And if I share my Google Drive with you, it will not let you use it, but it will let me download it as much as I can. Therefore, I know. I can. I created a actual shared files
That's
thing.
stop copyright infringement.
Yeah, we gotta be able to circumvent it somehow. So we created a Google Drive
Where's
account
Jose?
for that.
He loves this.
Which is shared files MDCC, right, guys?
I'm here.
And share files MDCC at gmail.com. And I believe the password was 8 plus 1001 1002. Or no, is that the other one? Do either you remember? Is it the 1001 1002, or is this the one with the QWERTY? Something tells me this might have been QWERTY. All right, here we are. Try to go to Google. When you go into Google, say that you're going to add another account, please. When you're adding the other account, you're going to put share files mdcc at gmail.com. I hope I don't have any phone number. I love it. Any other fake stuff you want to put in here? I always put the same thing. This is the only reason they'll never know my real stuff. I know when I get in there. I would love them to use that one of these days, though. Cute. Here he is, the actual ISO, and you have here the actual OVA. So just grab this guy here, the A plus ISO.
Can you tell us the password again?
I believe it's A plus 1001, 1002. That's the word A, then the word plus, and then the number 1001, 1002, all in numbers, 1001, 1002. That's my
Is the A
wild guess.
capital or lowercase?
I would say the A is capitalized, something tells me.
Where do we go to again once we get on here?
Google. Was it able to let you in?
Oh, I'm still trying to set it up.
Oh, okay.
I was like writing down everything.
Oh, okay. After you go into Google Drive and try to log on.
Capital A, the plus sign,
No,
1001.
the word plus. The word
plus spell out. All lowercase?
Yeah.
A, capital A, PLUS 1001 1002.
Mm-hmm.
That is not letting me in.
All right.
And it's share
Give me a
files or
second.
shared?
1 second. Yeah, it's share files. Let me get this here.
MDCC?
Yeah, let me paste that.
Yeah,
we could all have that. Oops, no, that's the wrong paste. Oh, somebody just put that there.
I did that, but I wasn't sure.
Share files. That's beautiful. It doesn't want to copy it. That looks right. Share files mdcc at gmail. Now, if that's not the password, give me a second. Let's see if I can.
There's a way to find your passwords, but you don't want to show us this. You can go into your settings and see your passwords in there.
Yeah, I know. But it's always 1 second. Share files. And then let me see if I remember. Here he is. Yeah, 1 QWERTY. I knew it was that one. So the number 1, then you go across from Q all the way up to P, and then the bracket that's right next to it. It's very, very difficult. The number 1, start with the letter Q, go across your keyboard until you get to the left bracket.
Yep, that's it.
All right, when you come in, you're going to see on the bottom names. The one that
It's
says
a
Kali Linux. Oh, go ahead.
it's a two-part verification. It needs a code
Oh,
from
yeah?
you.
All right. 1 second. Gotta go get the other phone. And all right, ready. You send it to me or
I sent the request just now.
all right.
I think we'll each have to do it though.
And what's funny is that if we all do it almost at the same time, sometimes
Several can do it
two
at
or three of
once.
them can sneak in. Great. Once again, circumventing security at all costs. No, I don't see that. I don't see the request. Give it a second
The
here.
phone number ends in 47.
Oh, that might be the reason why. Let's send it directly over there. They send a text. And that would be is it this guy here? Yeah, that's right now. 149 or G149547. Whoever is already at that step, most likely allow them to hit that button at the same time.
Yep, good.
I got to figure out of all my phone lines, which one is which. That's sad. It is. I got 4 phone lines. I don't even know what in the world I'm doing with those. Thank God I don't pay for them.
Okay, so you said open up a brand new Gmail account. I did.
No, not a brand new Gmail account. You
Oh.
sign in or add. When you're gonna go in, you're gonna have if you ever sign in to Google, it's gonna say that you have already signed in. And then when you hit your little icon, it has a button that says add another account.
Okay. Yeah,
And then there it's gonna ask you what's the name of the account. Don't create a brand new one. Just say share files MDCC.
Okay. SH. Share file.
With an S at the end.
Oh, with an S.
Files.
Okay. And what's the rest?
And then MDCC.
MDCC. Okay.
And then just click next. And then the
And drop
password is
and the password into the chat. So if you want to see, get them from chat.
Okay, so the
somebody put it already?
password is the number 1 and then QWERTY all the way down to P.
to left bracket. Yeah, to left bracket.
You include the left bracket?
Yes.
Okay. And verification code to the phone number ended in 47.
All right. Still seems to be the same code. No, here we go. They changed. G214031.
All right. All right, I'm in.
All right. You should be able to then see the file that says Kali Linux and then it ends in OVA. And then you see the A+ Windows 7 Pro x86.iso. Those are the only 2 files you need to download to your computers.
Okay.
What's the code again? The verification code?
If you're in the same screen right now, the current code that was supposedly available was 214031. I'm not sure if it timed out yet, but that was the last one that it gave me.
I'm sorry, 214?
031.
It doesn't work for me. It says there's too many attempts.
Too many attempts with the code? With
Yeah,
the
I think
temporary
so.
code? Oh, okay. Not a problem. You're gonna have to probably sign one more time in. You're gonna have to go backward and try to sign again. So it allows you to use a new code. It's sometimes it times out, or sometimes it just says, you know what, too many people came in with that same code. Must do something.
Yeah, it's asking me to do it in a few hours because there's too many attempts. I don't know.
To log in with your password?
No, for the code for this.
Oh, wow.
I don't know
Put
if
up,
it's my
put up
side.
20 red flags with Google. They're like, wait a minute. This looks
I
like a
didn't like that.
coordinated attempt at something.
Yeah. All right. Anybody else might be able to get in?
I'm busy
can't.
downloading the files.
Yeah, I had the same problem. I gotta wait a few hours.
Oh yeah, yeah.
In my,
no,
in my case, actually, it says can't scan file for viruses. So download
Correct.
anyway.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
I did that.
Yeah, it's gonna tell you because of the fact it's so huge that it's not able to scan it for any viruses.
Yeah, it's Diego. We trust him.
I'm inside the
I don't trust
email, so where I can find the document?
I'm sorry?
I'm inside the email, so where I can find the document that you're talking about?
You went into shared, you logged on to share files?
Yes.
Okay, but go to Google Drive then now. Click on Drive.
I got it.
Okay. And it's only the colleagues, the one that ends in .ova and the ISO of Windows, the one that ends in .iso.
I got it. Okay.
How many megabytes are these files? I'm already up to
3
150
gigs
meg-
and 3 gigs and 2 gigs.
Oh wow. Okay, so this is gonna
Yeah,
take
yeah.
them.
It's gonna be a while, depending how long,
Oh,
how big your circuit is. It'll take a while.
I got you.
Is the code
Uh,
still the same?
No, the code changes almost every minute. So if you just logged on, tell it to send me a code and then I can give you the new code.
I tried the same
it
number
says
that I tried the same number that you gave to Alvarez. So
And it
that's
worked.
all I
Yeah,
mean, it worked
but
for
it
me.
sometimes it needs to resend it, but sometimes it
Okay.
doesn't. So
Sorry.
You know,
as
I
long
think
as
we
it
can
gets you in.
download it off the website.
Which website? Sorry.
Kali
That'll be all.
Linux.
Yes, that is true. You can download directly the OVA from Kali Linux, but a lot of people have trouble finding it in the right place. Sometimes they download the ISO, which requires you know how to use Grub and how to use Pacman,
Oh, okay.
which is all commands inside the CLI. Here, it's just going to go and give you the whole thing installed already to facilitate the process because we only need to run commands. We don't need to know how to install Kali Linux or any form of Linux. We do need to know how to install the Windows.
Okay.
Okay, I got a question.
Mhm.
So there's gonna be a total of 5 gigs that we're downloading.
That is correct.
Yeah, I only got like in my C drive, I only got 7.48 gigs.
Ooh.
Am
All
I gonna
right.
need more gigs to unpack it?
Well, the OVA, no. The OVA is not going to use more space, but the Windows, when you install it, it's going to use up space. And then you can get rid of the ISO of Windows, which will give you back, what, 2 gigs temporarily. You could always uninstall it afterwards and delete everything, so you're going to get all your space back. But the only other choice is after you install and do the lab of a Windows installation, is using your computer maybe for the Windows testing environment, but I wouldn't play with that too much like that.
Okay.
It doesn't
Are we
grow
able
too
to-
much. For example, if I show you my virtual boxes, you'll see that although my CD is 2 gigs, if I go to Pepe, that's him right there, right? Yeah, there he goes. There goes my hard drive. Look how big he is. 4K.
All right, I got one more
4K.
issue. It's still downloading the Kali Linux,
Oh, there he
But
goes. That's him fully installed.
the-
5
The
minutes.
A plus Win 7 stopped. It said couldn't download, no permissions. And it
The
already
8.1?
downloaded like 150 gigs. I mean, 150 megabytes.
Can you share your desktop, please? Sorry, so you can
Yeah, all right.
see what it's showing.